All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the Bow Valley Nonprofit Speaker Series on event planning. Before we get started, I just want to share a couple housekeeping tips. So we've been getting around 20 participants to each of these sessions. I know in the webinar format, it's not always easy to see how many people are there. Your participation makes these sessions really engaging, so feel free to use the chat box. We'll have a Q&A session near the end of the presentation. So feel free to include your questions at any point, and we'll look at answering those at the end. We'll also have a couple of polls during the presentation today, and just know that your responses are anonymous on those polls. I'd like to say a huge thank you to Tara and Ruth at FCSS at the towns of Canmore and Banff for sponsoring these webinars. And I'd like to do a land acknowledgement. The Bow Valley is located on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot, the Tsuut'ina, and the Stoney Nakoda First Nations, the Métis Nation Region 3, and all the people who make their homes in this Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. Now I'd like to introduce Lauren Thomas. She's an event coordinator with the Town of Canmore. Lauren is a seasoned stage manager with almost 2 decades of experience in performance arts and special event coordination. In her role of events coordinator with the Town of Canmore, Lauren strives to produce community-minded events that create meaningful engagement for residents and visitors to Canmore alike. She believes that in a time of isolation and forced digital connection, it is imperative to provide her community with opportunities for safe and in-person human contact.
Hi, everybody.
We've also got Eamonn Reil, a visitor event specialist with the Town of Banff. Eamonn began his career in events in 1988 in theatre production before beginning a stage management apprenticeship with the Canada Actors Equity Association. During this time, Eamonn also completed a BA with honors in dramatic art from the University of Windsor. Eamonn has worked as a stage manager across Canada before moving into producing theatre and events as an operations manager for the Sudbury Theatre Centre, the manager of audience services for Banff Centre, and now the visitor event specialist with the Town of Banff. My name is Moselle Dibden. Now let's welcome Lauren and Eamonn.
Hey, everybody.
Hi, everyone.
I just need you to enable the participant screen sharing for me, please.
There we go.
Thanks for making the time to come out, everybody. We have a great little presentation for you.
Who doesn't love events?
Before we get started, can we do that first question in our poll, Zal? As noted, both Eamonn and I have a variety of events under our belts, and we're just wondering how many people who are in attendance today have produced an event before. Give it another minute or two or a few more seconds for everybody to respond. And it looks like we've got 5 responding that they've hosted events. That's fantastic. Let's do the second question before we get going to, just so we have a good idea of the people that we're presenting to you today. Where would you say that your skill levels as an event producer falls at this point in time? Are you going out as a first timer? Are you kicking the can a couple of times, or have you been doing it for a while now? Maybe like Eamonn and I. It seems like we've got a variety. That's fantastic.
Awesome.
I'm not going to go into my background because Moselle's done a great job of introducing both of us. So I think we can probably just get into the thick of it. Hey, Eamonn?
Totally.
So for me, especially for those people who haven't really been in the game as much as I would say Eamonn and I, one of the things that I do when I do event work is I break an event down into 5 different stages, because sometimes it can be overwhelming, especially when it's the first time that you're putting an event together. So the 5 stages that I look at breaking an event into is conceptualization and vision, planning and logistics, marketing, execution, and follow-up. For me, the way that I take a look with regards to conceptualization and vision is like, what is the overall vision? What are the high level of details? We're not going to get into the minutia of everything, just like the overarching details. So I can start breaking things up into different areas. So it makes it a lot easier when I move into the planning and logistics stage. Planning and logistics, that's where you start to grind things down and start understanding what elements that you're working with, so that you can really take a look at that with eyes wide open, and how you can best make that element of your event work seamlessly. Once you've got all of that figured out, that's when you're going to be able to come up with all of your marketing strategy, because you want to be able to put things out that are successful, not just in the event for your patrons, but also you want to be able to communicate successfully what it is you're doing, so that you have your best turnout for an event. Execution is actually the hands-on portion. And by this, it's also, it's not just the day of, but it's the days leading up to, when you're on site setting up, or you're in your space setting things up, or you're creating your packages in your office setting up. Also the day and the day of, and the pack up, the strike, the tear down of your event. That's all part of execution. And then an event is never complete until you've completed your follow-up. So follow-up will include things like, you know, do you have revenue to count because you did a fundraising event? What is your complete budget look like? Have you paid all of your expenses? And have you sent out your thank yous to all the people that supported you, whether they're sponsors, volunteers, or community supporters in one regard or another?
So to jump a little bit into the vision statement and purpose. So it is a bit of a blanket statement, and it's any event application coming in. It's important that you have some sort of vision statement, and there's going to be room for it somewhere. But also it helps you think about what is it you actually want to achieve. So what is the goal of it? What do you want to achieve? Specifically, what do you intend to plan? I want to do a parade on Banff Avenue on February 23rd, my birthday, from 2:30 until 3:30 in the afternoon. Great. There's an overall thing. There's no specifics about how I'm doing the parade whatsoever, but we know that there is that summary of what we want to do. Or I want to do a St. Patrick's Day concert. I want to do something for the public downtown in the space, and then I want to take it and shop it around the bars on March 18th. Both in the afternoon from 1 to 3 and in the evening from 6 to 9. Boom. Things to avoid: overstating or overestimating your goals, because that immediately will be a bit of a red flag. I'm going to host a concert for 100,000 people at the Banff Rec Grounds. That's a lot of people. Do you know the size of the rec grounds? When are you doing it? What do you mean a concert? Versus I'm going to host a string quartet performing to do high tea behind the Banff admin grounds with permission from Parks Canada on July 23rd from 1 to 4. Oh, that's much more reasonable. But if you overestimate or overplan everything, it does sound like you are reaching, and immediately we're going to say, how will you actually pull that off? Avoid things that are non-specific. I'm going to do an event. We're going to have a horsey show. I'm going to give candy to babies. These are, I'm using gross examples to highlight something non-specific. I want to do a parade thing in Banff sometime next year. I can't permit that. I can't do anything with that. You need to pass me along some more information for me to give you critical feedback on how to move forward. But that vision statement tells me that you've put thought into what you want to do. You have an ambition, and you've already begun doing some of the research and planning for that event. So you can state a successful vision statement and why you want to do something awesome in one of our towns.
And that vision statement also really helps out with you know, keeping yourself aligned with what it is that you want to do so that you don't stray from the intent of what you're planning to do as well.
And Christina's had a question saying she missed the beginning. Not sure if we addressed anything in regards to permits for events on private property. It'll be different in each community, and I think Lauren and I can touch on that as we get a bit further in the presentation. But thank you. If we don't get it to it, Christina, please, there'll be time for questions at the end, so please ask that.
So timelines is super important when you're an event planner. For me, I always make sure that I even start thinking about things well in advance. For the work that I do at the Town of Canmore, I'm booking and thinking about things a year in advance, not a month in advance. Because if you shortchange yourself, you're going to set yourself up for failure and not success. I personally develop a critical path for all of my events that lays out when I need to accomplish things, whether it be making sure that I have volunteer vests ordered, or I have contracted a vendor to build something for me, or I have contracts to sign for different artists that are going to come in and work. Everything is mapped out on a calendar critical path, and that allows me to figure out where all my pinch points are and where I need to start thinking about pivotal dates and tasks that need to be accomplished in a realistic time, and be realistic about estimating your timelines. For me, I'm very big on creating buffer time. So if I sit down and I know that I need to have a relative neighbor letter out about a street closure, I'm going to give myself 2 hours to write that letter, but I'm going to add an extra hour because I know something's going to happen, and I want that extra buffer time. Don't shortchange yourself, because that will just make things more difficult in the end.
Awesome points in there. This is where timelines and logistics for planning your event can overlap. I want to have live musicians on a stage, so I need to order a stage. I need to book musicians. I need to make sure they can get here. I need there to be backline, catering, tents, heater, power. What's the order in which I do those? Some things you can do very like catering. I'm not going to order now. I might research caterers with 5 minutes spare time. I can do that a month out. Can I get a stage and technicians and artists in time? Gosh golly, I want to think about that way in advance, and I want to program something thoughtful, so that dictates more time, and that also dictates some of the logistics on the day. And that comes down to what Lauren said about a critical path, mapping that out in advance and having a good think. Event specific as well. I made the mistake for National Day for Truth and Reconciliation of saying, oh, we're running out of our 94 calls to action. I should order more. Gosh golly, everyone's ordering them, and the center was sold out because I did not plan ahead on that. So there's items around that specifically. I want to order pride flags. Well, if I order that the week before Pride Week, you're not going to get any. But if I order that January 1st, beginning of a new fiscal year, oh gosh, well, of course we have time to get them. Is it important that you order them January 1st? No, but you've got that grace time, versus if I want to get quality artists for New Year's Eve, I should have booked them in August. I'm just booking them now because of other things, but already I'm behind the gun. Yeah. But there's an idea of your timelines, and as Lauren said, that critical path is so important to set yourself up for success. And a question from Yuka. Excited to see pop-up food vendors in Canmore. What is the criteria to become one? AHS, municipal standpoint. What if we deal with this question in the end? And because it's Canmore specific, I think it'd be a great one for Lauren. So you could just bring that up at the end, okay? Sorry, Lauren, anything else in there?
No, I think one of the things that we should probably hit on is timelines with regards to event permits for both communities, seeing as we're on the idea of time. Some of the things that you're going to want to work into your critical path is the specifics for each community if you're going to be applying for an event permit, because they both differ significantly. The Town of Canmore has 2 application calls that we do. The first happening from, and I'm going to go in a general calendar year being January through to December. The first call of the year happens between May 1st, happens for events that take place between May 1st to October 31st, and the deadline to apply is December 1st. So I actually have that call happening next week. We've got notices going out in social media and the paper to advise everybody that as of November 1st, we'll be accepting those calls. Events happening between November 1st and April 30th, the deadline to apply is July 1st, and that formal call generally goes out the Tuesday after the May long weekend. So it varies. Sometimes it's the 20th, sometimes it's the 22nd, but usually that last week of May is when we put that formal call out. We still do accept applications in the meantime. They absolutely must be submitted 60 days prior to your suggested event date. But priority is given to the applications that are already received, so that if you are looking to do something at the Canmore Civic Center, but there's already been a date request for the same day that you've put in that was submitted during the event call takes priority.
Town of Banff, different layout, different format, different processes. So for us, existing events, you've already been doing an event, or you're a seasoned event planner, we look for 90 days, roughly 3 months before you'd want to hold that to receive your application. Why 90 days? Events are really a team of two. There's my counterpart, Christine, in community events, and there's myself in destination events. And we have lots of other things to do. And we have to go and vet it with the town, get back to you, get more feedback. So that 90 days is a minimum, even for existing events, to make sure I can talk to all the people we need to talk to get you the feedback, because things change every year. New events, I really recommend at least 1 year for the Town of Banff, especially if you're new to the planning process or just new to planning a good slot in the Town of Banff. So we make sure we have the right fits. I'm getting this passed by directors and all the managers and 4 people, so it's on their radar. So in terms of snow clearing or gardening, engineering, construction projects, so it's planned in. So it can't be, you can totally do an event on this road, we're just going to be closing it at the same time and no one can get to your event site because of the large gaping holes. Sorry. So really 1 year. Candace, just 1 sec on that question. Event applications are due 90 days. Yep. But submitting an application does not guarantee you will get a permit. An application is the beginning of the process, and Lauren and I will go through some of that. But it doesn't mean you're going to get a permit. There's things you need to follow and do. It might not be a good fit for that time, or it could be something better for another year. We feel not adequate time. We'll say, sorry, this is not a good fit for this year. The other factor with that of the town is capacity, that we are a very small team. And though we do lots of awesome things, we only have so many hours in the day. Which is very much the same for Lauren, who's covering a few roles right now. So that's another factor when applying, is that if we don't have capacity to make sure you are following all the things you need to follow, then it's not going to be a good fit for you. It's not going to be a good fit for us. And we talk about it a bit later down the road.
Yeah, and it's also not just about capacity within our individual departments, but it's also capacity within interdepartmentally as well. So do I have the ability to have Streets and Roads assist with a road closure for your parade if I have a marathon happening the same day? So we need to take into consideration what other sort of interdepartmental support needs to be provided in order to make your event successful, and whether or not we have the capacity to do that.
So 2 questions. First, coming up from Candace McMullen is Harvey Heights included in Canmore or Banff? Lauren Thomas.
I believe it's Canmore, but I would have to get back to you on that one.
And keep in mind, I'm talking about the Town of Banff, not Banff National Park, and I'll get more into that lovely and intricate difference later. We have another question from Bow Valley Climate Action. What are some examples of events do not need permits approved ahead of time? That could be different to Banff and Canmore. In Banff, based on our policy C5001, those are events that are included entirely on existing conference centers or at Banff Center in Art and Creativity. So if you're having a wedding inside a conference center, you don't need a permit. If something's being produced at Banff Center for Art and Creativity, you don't need a permit. But if it's on public land or private land, you're going to need some form of approval from the Town of Banff, whether it's just a thank you, we know what's happening, or it's a oh my word, you cannot have a demolition derby on Banff Ave. That is not a good idea.
Yeah, in the town of Canmore, anything that happens on town of Canmore land requires an event permit. It doesn't matter if that means the riverbanks of the Bow, or if you are at Quarry Lake, or if you're trying to do a lemonade stand on Main Street. Everything needs to be processed for an event permit. If you are looking at private property, so maybe you're hosting a golf tournament at one of our local golf clubs, that does not require an event permit because that is happening on private property. Or if you're doing a fundraiser in somebody's backyard, that does not require an event permit. But if you take that fundraiser out into the cul-de-sac in front of that house, that then requires an event permit.
And Ruth just popped in saying Harvey Heights, you believe, is part of Bighorn, municipal district of Bighorn. So thank you, Ruth.
Perfect. Thanks, Ruth. If we don't have any other questions, let's move on. Insurance, it's imperative. You need it to drive a car. You need it to, insure your home, whether you own it or you're a renter. You're going to need it for an event. Liability coverage is imperative. You never know what can happen. It could be a stormy day and a tent flips and somebody gets hurt. You could have somebody in a parade who twists their ankle and something happens. You always want to make sure that you have liability coverage so that, as the slide says, you're covered if something does go wrong. Knock on wood, that's not the case, but you want to make sure that you've got that coverage. In the town of Canmore, we do require all events to have a minimum of $5 million general liability coverage, and the town of Canmore needs to be named as an additional insured on that policy. What that means is your event is covered, the town of Canmore is named as an additional insured for anything that happens on that property.
And that's pretty much the exact same for the town of Banff. 5 million general liability. The town of Banff is named as an additional insured party, but because we are in Banff National Park, technically as our land person, we also have to include, in this verbiage, I always forget, it's on our website in a bunch of places, Her Majesty in the right of Canada as representing the Parks Canada Agency. I have screwed that up, but there's very specific verbiage that has to be included for them to be covered in that. And if your insurance does not have that, which has happened once in my short time with the town, your event can't proceed. So it is up to you. It's on our website. You can Google it and find the verbiage, and it is incredibly important. And we do say minimum 5 billion liability. That could change if you're doing something super awesome, but also if there's horses, you need separately equestrian insurance because that is not covered under a standard policy. You have bouncy castles, that's also not covered under a standard policy, so then you need to have that. On parades, every automobile has to have automobile insurance. So there's other facets around that could be in addition to things that aren't covered in your policy that could be a requirement. And there was one, sorry, Lauren, go ahead.
At the town of Canmore, we actually will not issue your event permit to you, like your permit certificate for your event, until we have a copy of that certificate of insurance on file.
Christina had a comment, I believe, about a previous slide. As long as, say, a car dealership stays off the sidewalk, we don't need a permit. Immediately, that sounds like a business permit versus a special event and on private land. So that would be two different things. Versus something that isn't related to directly affecting your business, versus you are doing something that's outside your business scope, which could increase your liability, which could change traffic, which could change EMS routes. And then I would strongly recommend that you do ask about special event permitting.
Ready, Freddie? So, talked about insurance. Let's talk about what we're going to insure. This would be your site map. A site map is imperative. It helps you plan how things are going to move, what the flow is going to be like at your event, and where you and your guests can find everything. As a part of an event permit, if you're doing anything in a park or on a street or anything that's outdoor, you absolutely need to submit a site map as a part of your event permit application. Some of the things that you're going to want to include on your event site map is the parameters. So where the the boundaries of the space that you're going to use. Are you going to have fencing set up? Note those things on there, your entrances, your exits. Definitely want to include your emergency muster points, not just for your knowledge and for the permit knowledge, but for your volunteer team. So if you're submitting for any other kind of additional support documents that are going to need to come in, they may need to know where your emergency muster points are. If you're going to have structures, setting up tents, any sort of seated area, bleachers, or staging, any kind of staffing locations. So if you've got an operations location, if you have a volunteer tent, any first aid or security points, they should be noted on your site plan as well. Guest locations that are important to make sure that everybody knows: washrooms, garbage, recycling stations. When it comes to something like a parade, you're going to want to map out your actual parade route so that we have a very clear understanding of where your participants are going to travel, so that we have an idea of where road closures are going to be, but also so that we can make sure that we have a very good understanding of where attendees are going to park and how they're going to move, and where we're going to have to divert traffic in order to make sure that the rest of the town can still function while the parade is in place.
Sorry, Lauren, am I cutting you off?
No, go ahead.
For me, a site map is a big red light, green light. If you, a strong site map listing what Lauren just said, which is a great list, shows me you put the forethought in to what you want to have happen. That means you have thought about safety and contractors, logistics. You booked your artists, you booked your stage, your backline, your crew. You have first aid kits, fire extinguishers. You know where your power is coming from. You know where people are parking, where they're going pee and poo. A bad site map, or someone who says, I'm going to figure it out on the day. There were very few events you can figure out on the day. And that is a huge red light. If you cannot show the planning behind that is realistic, then I am concerned. So a really detailed site map that I know is not true is worth nothing. A cocktail napkin that is incredibly accurate with good detail, hey, you have shown me the forethought, but that's really what this shows. So yeah, site map. And you can draw and measure things in Google Maps. People don't realize. So you can draw a Google map, just do a little clip thing, clip it from your computer, put it into a Word doc. You can add in layers, and there's your site map right there. Boom, parade route. You can even do traffic management in there. Huge.
Yeah, for me, it doesn't need to be to scale. That's minimalist for me, but proper notation of where things are going and how things flow, that is imperative. Next up, waste management. This always seems to be the last thing people think about, but it should always be probably one of the first things people think about after they have the site map completed. Waste can include anything from your garbage, recyclables, containers, food waste. Every effort should be made to try and do your best to make sure that this is collected and taken care of. You don't want to have garbage all over your site while you've got people there. So make sure that you have the forethought to have things placed appropriately within your site plan. With the Town of Canmore, we have a very strong commitment to sustainability, and one of the things that we have adopted is a towards zero waste philosophy. What that means is, at the Town of Canmore, as a part of your event permit application, we require you to put in a waste management plan that does demonstrate how a minimum of 80% of the waste generated from your event will be diverted from a landfill. So we require you to consider what kind of garbage is actually going in a garbage can? How can we recycle to reduce the amount of garbage going into that garbage can, getting to the landfill? And how can we start incorporating ideas that have green thought behind them? So how can we compost? One of the things that we try and work with our event producers on is making sure, especially when it comes to food vendors, because they create a lot of the waste that comes out of an event, how can we get our food vendors to work in such a way that they are working in a more green method? So we look to have food vendors adopt compostable service materials, whether that's the wooden forks and knives instead of plastic forks and knives, like the I can't remember the name of it, but compostable cups and service plates and bowls. And we're happy at the Town of Canmore to help you by providing bins, appropriate bins to collect these waste management materials.
Everything Lauren said, 126%. We don't have as dedicated a policy in terms of what has to be diverted, but if your event will generate single-use plastics, generate unnecessary waste, it does not fit in the character for the Town of Banff National Park. So totally looking for certified biodegradable, how much can be diverted, how much can be prevented from being used at all, how much is biodegradable, how much is reusable. Huge, huge. And people, in my impression, often think, oh yeah, waste management, I'll put bins right in the center and that's it. That doesn't work so well. You really want them where people enter and exit. Who empties the bins? That's another one. You can't just set them up. Like throughout the day, you need to manage that waste and get it to the place where it goes to a holding area. And then at the end of the event, you get it off to the appropriate large scale bin. But that's just logistics that people think they've taken care of, but there's more to that. So really, as Lauren said, to put the thought into waste management from the beginning, because then you're determining what supplies you're ordering, how that fits the character of your event. If your vendors are ordering the right supplies, yeah.
And there are organizations in the Bow Valley that can help you with that as well. If it's not something that you are looking to put a volunteer team in charge of as a part of your event, by all means, reach out to someone like an organization like Flying Pigs. There is a fee involved, but they look after everything on your behalf when it comes to things like recycling and helping out with waste management plans. A number of sports teams love to get involved for a small honorarium and the ability to keep the recycling for themselves in order to do fundraising for their events. So there's a number of different ways that you can accomplish the task of a waste management plan. You just need to sit down and think about it a little bit first rather than leaving it to the last minute.
Question from Ruth Pryor. Does Carla Bitts for the Town of Banff help with any environmental waste stuff? So Carla is awesome. The town is working on creating special event bins that special events can use outside of our own. But the Town of Banff also does have some resources like garbage recycling, compostable bins responsible for bags. We do have large special event disposal bins that you can use to put your stuff into there and have the town haul it away for a fee. But yes, the town does have some resources, and in our 5-year plan, we really do want to get a special event toolkit that I can use in my events, but also other people doing events can say, can I get the trailer and there's the stuff you need. But yes, also finding out about suppliers in the valley. Sustain Driven is one that does towards zero waste. Peter Duck with Bow Valley Waste Commission is still doing that. Flying Pigs, Lauren mentioned. Tree Hugger is another one. So there are some resources out there.
Okay, so communications and signage plans. This is really important because obviously you want to tell everybody about your event, but you also want to be able to advise people about the happenings around your event. A lot of people think that communications is just about, selling tickets or letting people know about the date and the time and the location of your event, but it's a little bit more than that. I think you want to make sure that, especially in our 2 small communities, the community members who may not necessarily be drawn or attracted to your event know about your event happening, because there's so many things that always happen in both of these communities because everybody wants to come and visit us. So it's always really good to, in addition to thinking about the typical advertising pieces, billboards, banners, social media, that you're talking to the locals via a public notice in the paper or a relevant neighbor letter. So take, for instance, the Canmore Highland Games is a perfect example. They take over Centennial Park for the majority of 4 days. They send out letters to everyone, letting them know that the park is being taken over. You still have access to the park from this time to this time, but as of this date and time, it becomes a ticketed event and the park is not available for general public access. It also talks about, we're closing down this portion of the street in order to accommodate event activities. So you'll need to make arrangements for different areas to park, or there may be disruptions on getting to where you're going to go as a result of living in that neighborhood. Also having directional signage grouped in there, because again, the general public may not be attending your event, but there could be people coming to you, to the community, that are going to be experiencing the community around your event. You want to be able to provide that directional signage so that it doesn't inhibit them.
Lauren hit all the points. It's great to advertise your events, people come, but telling people who don't come, you close a road, and you don't tell the residents, you will spend all the time when you should be running an event getting an earful from a bunch of angry residents. There'll be complaints to an organization, and likely you won't get an event permit the next year because you could not fulfill that aspect of communication. Directional informative signage. It gets a little more complicated in the town of Banff because we do have to, anything outside of the event site has to be approved by planning and development. And there are certain kinds of signs that are allowed or are not allowed depending on the nature of the event. So show us your secrets. How are you telling people about everything?
Something else to start thinking about as you're developing these plans is your hazard assessment. So for me, a hazard assessment is thinking about all the things that could go wrong and how you're going to prepare yourself to either mitigate those problems or solve those problems so that they don't become repeat problems. What I'm thinking about is a couple of different things, and I know that Eamonn has 3 in particular that he likes to assess for, and then I can show some examples of those 3 afterwards.
So really, anyone's had OH&S training and you do your little rubric. What can go wrong? What are the consequences if it goes wrong? So the severity. What can you do to mitigate it? So that's everything from lost children to fire, wildlife, animals, drunken disruption, vehicle intrusion, inclement weather, flooding, fire, famine, feasts. Looking at those 3 things to then build your emergency response plan, which we'll get to in a sec. But Lauren has some other great examples.
Yeah, so part of the things with the hazard assessment, so you've got a volunteer team and you're closing a road down and they're setting up barricades. One of the things that can go wrong is that volunteers may not be as familiar with the barricade. They may pinch their fingers, so that could cause some injury. What are we going to do? We're going to provide all of our volunteer team who are doing barricade duty with work gloves to better protect their hands, to make sure that they have all 10 of their digits when they leave. Something else is maybe you're doing a 3-on-3 hockey tournament at the pond in Canmore. Your volunteer team, it's going to get slippery out there. So maybe make sure that we avoid any slips and falls and head injuries by providing grips for people to put on the bottom of their boots when they do need to be out on the ice. Another one that a lot of people don't think about is hearing protection. Make sure that you've got hearing protection and you've got eyeglass. Safety glasses for people whenever they're doing anything that is super loud or has anything that would have a debris element to it. Super easy things to do, super cheap to include in your budget, and absolutely 125% worth it if it does protect that one time that it does happen.
An event that cannot be safely produced is not worth producing.
Exactly.
Emergency response plans. Sorry, Lauren, I'm just jumping in here. Is that kosher?
Okay, go ahead.
Totally required by both communities. In fact, anywhere you go, people are going to want to know if stuff goes wrong, what are you going to do about it? Everything from a minor medical emergency, you have first aid kits on site and a certified trained first aider, great, to you have to call an ambulance. Well, who's going to call the ambulance? Who's going to make sure it can enter your event site? Where's the ambulance going? Is your event of a consequence where you need to actually notify Alberta Health Services so they're aware of the nature of the event and what could happen? Do you need to have an ambulance on site? Town of Banff, it's really wanting to see that you've thought about these things and you have the phone numbers of who to call. Really embarrassing. Scoping out other events, going to one in Calgary, super neat things that I took away from my own events. But then sure enough, we find a lost child and no one at the event at 9 o'clock at night knows how to deal with little 5-year-old William who's crying and is like, really? This is like $1.2 million event. So you gotta think these things through. If something goes wrong, you don't want to be flipping through a book or saying, what's the number for Parks Dispatch? You want to have a plan. You want to make sure everyone knows that plan. If you're the organizer, part of that is to, after someone calls 911, is to call you and say something's gone wrong.
And it's not just medical emergencies that we need to think about. If you're putting up tents, you need to think about a structure collapse or a structure below over. You want to make sure that tents, especially like 10 by 10 tents, people don't think that they move, but those things can fly. I can attest to it. I've seen it happen. You're going to want to take into consideration a vehicle intrusion. What happens if somebody, you know, doesn't see that a parking lot is closed and you've got vendors set up and they drive into the parking lot? What about a train derailment? We have events that get put on in the parking lot of Elevation Place all the time, which is directly next to a railroad track. These are obviously, we're not looking for how are you going to save the world, but how are you going to clear your guests in a safe manner? Where are they going to go? And the little things that you need to think about that may not come across as important, they are important. And we just want to make sure that you have an understanding of the space and the landscape that you're in and how you're going to handle those difficulties. Yeah. Anything else? Traffic management. I'm going to let Eamonn start off on this one because it's so much more difficult in Banff than it is in Canmore.
I'll touch on it in a sec, but we really have two main roads. And as soon as we close one of them, because like who doesn't want to do something awesome on Banff Ave, that does create logistical concerns in the town, but also I need to know that you're closing the road safely, that you can demonstrate in your traffic management plan, which is separate from a parking plan. Parking plan, where are you telling people to park? Where are you putting your people to park? Where's the public parking and how are they getting there? Traffic management, how are you closing a road? Where are your barricades? Where are your signs, advance notice? Where are your flaggers who are certified and have that, which can be volunteer and they can take the course online for like 50 bucks. Or you can bring in someone at 50 bucks an hour and you know they take care of the job. But also, how do you route traffic out? How do we make sure that we don't have a 20-minute lineup on Cave Avenue trying to get over the bridge and people are literally in their car eating their children because they are so hungry because it's taking so long to get through? You really, really, really need to do this and do this well. It is worth, if you are not new to if you are new to traffic management, to find a consultant and get them to help you and advise and say, what do we need to do this safely? This is a huge area of liability, both in terms of your event success and also in terms of public safety, that something could go wrong outside of your event site that is beyond your control that you are responsible for.
And I think it's also imperative for both communities because we do have so many outsiders that come to visit us that don't know the normal traffic flow of either community when there isn't something that's causing a road closure or a full parking lot. Exactly. We have the sightseer drivers and we have the sightseer cyclists. I don't know how many times I have seen people on bikes busy staring at the mountains, not paying attention, and they drive out into the middle of a road. So we need to make sure that if they're not paying attention during general downtimes, during a high traffic event time, they are just as safe as everybody else. So really take the time to sit down and evaluate where we're diverting traffic to make your event happen and how we're getting people safely out of their cars and and attending your event, whether that be in a guest capacity or in a volunteer capacity. That leads us into additional supporting documents. There's always more to an event permit application than just the application and the documents that we've gone over and highlighted thus far. Some of these things are issued from other governing bodies, so they're not necessarily overseen by Eamonn and I. For example, a special event business license in the town of Canmore is not issued by me. It's an application that's submitted to our business registries department. So once that has been submitted and you receive your permit back from them, that needs to be included in your event permit application. You need in the town of Canmore, you need to have a special event business license if you are doing an event that has a registration or ticket sales, or if you have any sort of vendor selling revenue type thing. If it's a free event to the general public and nobody has to buy anything, a special event business license is not required. Did you want to touch on that in your world before I move on to some of the other documents, Eamonn?
Different name, incredibly similar process.
Building permits in the town of Canmore, anything that has any kind of tent or built structure for your event that is larger than 600 square feet, which is roughly a 30 by 30 tent, or collection of tents to expand beyond 600 square feet does require a building permit. And that's actually a provincial law now as a result of some of the tent structure collapses and flips that have happened in our province. So that's beyond any capacity that I have to say, no, you don't need that. It's now Alberta law. So make sure you do some research into that if you are putting up tents. It is not something that you can just flippantly fill out and submit. There are a number of required documents when you're submitting that application that needs to be included, including detailed site plans. If you're hiring a company to do the tenting for you, contacts there, they need to know different things pending the size and capacity, such as like where your smoke detection systems are running from, audio systems. Again, the Canmore Highland Games is a perfect example with the big Kaylee tent that has a capacity of 600 people. They need to have all these different elements in order to have their building permit issued to have that put up. Did you want to cover on some of these, Eamonn?
Just to re-highlight, a lot of it's beyond Laura and I's control. And if you do not get permissions from the relevant organizations, we will say, no, you're not getting a permit. You don't have your AGLC, which also involves contact with RCMP. No, I don't care if it's going to be the best drinking event ever. We're not giving you a permit. That's a bad idea. And these can be things that are totally new. In Banff National Park, I'll get touch on this again in a sec, restricted activity permits. There's something that's needed if you want to do certain things. So you, and I'm not the one, I don't know all the rules about that, but it's up to you to do the research to see what needs to happen. And if I know, I will absolutely consult. But that's the burden of proof in that case is on you, the event producer.
Some other things to take into consideration in Canmore is if you're hiring a photographer or a videographer to capture your event, a film permit is required when on Town of Canmore land. I'm currently overseeing that. It's super easy. That's probably like the least amount of work that you need to do for any permit as a part of an event permit. And I can walk you through those. There are sometimes fees associated, sometimes not. Again, I can work through that, but that does lead into other fees associated as a part of some of the documentation required for an event permit. For example, the special event business license, there is a fee in Canmore. It's a per day fee, not anything generated off of revenue. It's just a simple fee per day. A building permit fee, though, is dependent upon the size of the structure that you're building and the amount of time and energy put into the work to make that happen. I'm not able to quote on that. That's more of an engineering department thing, but again, depending on whether or not it's I guess commercial versus nonprofit, which I'm assuming most of the people who are here, there are different scales. There's also a cost recovery program for the interdepartmental support that goes in to an event in the town of Canmore. So if you're a nonprofit group who is putting on the event, I have a scaled rate system. If it's free general public, it's a 25% cost recovery. If you're doing a ticketed event as a nonprofit, it's a 50% cost recovery. So if you're looking at having 20 barricades and the barricades have a base fee, you would pay 25% of what the base fee is for those barricades rather than the full price that a commercial booking would do.
Because we have 10 minutes, I'm just going to quickly jump on the Town of Banff. We have a fees and charges bylaw, which council directed that I have to charge. So I have to charge you. However, there's something that I cannot charge you for that benefits the community. I will. Not-for-profits often get a lot of exemptions. I might not charge you for rentals, but I might need to charge for labor because that is an actual cost accrued by the town. You can follow up both of us or just Google our sites and see all the information. Sorry, Lauren, go ahead. What's next?
Considerations unique to each of the communities. I'm going to go real quick because there's only one major one for the town of Canmore in comparison to what Eamonn has to deal with in Banff. If you're doing an event that crosses over between town of Canmore and Alberta Parks land, an Alberta Parks events permit is required. I have no hands-on with any of that. All I can do is say that if you're running a marathon and you're cutting through the Nordic Center and coming down through to the Bow River, an event permit from Alberta Parks is required to access Alberta Parks land for the portion of your event. And I cannot issue my event permit until that permit is issued because they have so many more stringent requirements as a part of their event permitting process. And I need to make sure that those as a park, those requirements are met before I can permit my portion of the event. For more detail, check out their website.
Unique to the town of Banff, we have so many bylaws. I think there's 17 of our bylaws that do directly affect special events. So the nature of your event will dictate that. The big ones to read are Special Event Policy C5001, which is our newly approved council special event policy, is much, much cleaner. Our special event standards is a dog's breakfast. I am so sorry. It does have a lot of useful information. It is just very, it's not optimally laid out. And that is sort of a next step once I have capacity in 2035 to review that. No, in February, I've got some capacity. Our community standards bylaw, another one, because that's everything from noise to waste to how you affect people. Are you following? There's so many bylaws. So we'll talk about that when that comes up. Next to the town of Banff is considerations of the types of events. It's a little more complicated that we do have two streams. You have community events, which is basically either by the community or for the community, mainly to benefit residents. That's my colleague, Christine The Rock, who's awesome. Then there's me with destination events, which is an events focused program by anyone, primarily to attract people. People have to come to Banff to participate in the event. They're not already here. Then we have different types of events. So the big thing is it has to fit in with the culture of the town of Banff. So culture could be mountain culture. That could be unique. You are Filipino, Irish, German Catholic, whatever. There's a cultural exhibit, farmers markets, fruit and beverage. It's all in our policy, just so you know that these are here. That's broken down. Next slide, considerations unique to the town of Banff is that HARC events, because I can only permit within the town boundary. We see a little picture there. Anything outside of that is this jurisdiction of Parks Canada. It's my colleague, Jennifer Gagne. She and I do work very closely, which is wonderful, because if you are doing anything that goes outside or is Parks Canada land within the town of Banff, like the Visitor Center, Banff Avenue Square, the Parks admin grounds or Cascade Gardens, those, though they're in the town boundary, are Parks Canada land, and I cannot permit those for anything. Anything you want to do in the park that involves or outside the park, like signs, if you want to do fireworks, you want to have firearms, even within the town site, you need a restricted activity permit from Parks Canada. And please tell me if you're bringing firearms or even a replica in the town. What a horrible surprise. One Canada Day a few years ago, reading in the notes that people did that. Oh my word. Drones. Like, just no, please. Logistically, 3 reasons. There are 2 heliports and 1 aerodrome, which effectively, except for about 3 feet at the Banff Springs property, all the way on the southeast corner here, is covered by that. But the really important one is wildlife. We're a national park. That is really our core identity. The sound of a drone does not fit. It disturbs wildlife, disturbs not plants, birds. And that is the big, big thing, is that we are the guests in the park for a number of reasons. Drones are not a good idea. Also, wildlife. We are guests in the park. Your emergency response plans need to account for if the elk herd is going to be in Central Park when you're planning your event. I guess you're not planning your event in Central Park that day. Parks Canada just takes some actions with that in terms of hazing and moving things around. That's a huge consideration. What is your plan B? You cannot have any animal attractants, like a bundle of hay for people to sit on. Oh, ungulans eat hay. That's a horrible idea. Making sure your garbages are empty. I can talk more on that later. Next slide, please, Lauren. Considerations to Banff. We only have 2 roads. We have to be very careful how we direct people through the town. There's only one way across the Bow Vehicle Bridge, and this is the big, big thing. If we are doing something that is so awesome, it is going to back up vehicles and delay them. That affects EMS. For example, my first Canada Day, following traditional Canada Day plans, everyone's going down the same road, and there's a fender bender, and traffic is backed up onto the highway. If an ambulance had to get out, or fire, or police, that is bad. So we need to plan traffic very, very carefully. We now have paid parking and free parking in town. A lot of our popular sites are booked way in advance, so it's huge to make sure that you are asking for the right space at the right time. Traffic volume in a normal year, between mid-May and mid-September, we exceed the town limit. There's just simply, we are getting too many cars and there's nowhere to put them. We have, it affects EMS response times, so we do not issue at this time any new event permits for that period. It's always worth asking, and I can always go do a one-up and say, would we consider this small thing? But no, from the get-go, we're coming of a place saying, I don't think this is a good fit. One question coming up from Bow Valley Climate. Are there any supports available to groups planning a new event in the process? There's Lauren and I directly. Please reach out. What's our next slide?
Event tips.
Whew.
We're almost ready to wrap. So over my years, there are 4 things that I always do as I lead into event week. I grocery shop for myself, make sure that I've got food to eat when I get home, because there's nothing worse than coming home from an event to an empty fridge. On the day of the event, you will find that you will never have time to go and get food. So make sure you pre-order a meal for yourself and your crew that you're working with, your immediate crew who are by your side, because you need to stay nourished on the day of. You don't want to go 10 hours without eating. You'll end up collapsing. I have pets. I don't have kids. So I always make arrangements for my pets, make sure my dogs get walked. They have somebody who sees them over the course of the day, because I will be gone for 12 hours. And that's just not fair to them. And something that I've learned, always bring extra shoes and socks. You want to keep your feet happy. The longer you're in a pair of shoes, the more tired your shoes will get, because they conform to the sole of your shoe. So by changing out your running shoes when you're on the ground working, or if you're in running shoes and then you have to put on heels because you're doing a fundraising event, bring a couple of different pairs of heels that match your outfit, because your feet will stay much happier. Socks are important, especially in the wintertime, because when you're in your warm boots, your socks are going to start to sweat and they'll absorb that sweat. You want to keep your feet happy and dry, so change out your socks.
Love it. Ruth Pryor says, great tips, Lauren. Tips from Eamonn. Any event, the devil's in the details. So you've made sure you have a stage and you have artists. Those are the big things. And if something goes wrong, for the big things, people generally pool together when big things go wrong. I lose sleep over the little things, like how does the cream get from the green room fridge to the backstage green room? Because imagine you have artists who are performing for a long period of time. They have to go to the washroom and eat. They can't eat, they get grumpy, performance goes down, people are not happy. So those little details can balloon up. So you really want to take a point to brainstorm and think, what haven't I thought about? The devil is in the details. Budgeting your time and your money. Events cost money and events cost time. Lauren hit on this, and a really good point is always budget more. I'm doing my budget for New Year's Eve, which again, I am 3.5 months late on, and I add on an extra 10% onto everything. Worst case, things go over budget and I can account for it. Best case, there's a cost saving to the taxpayer, or there's an extra thing I'm asked to put in by council administration, and I have room for that. But things will always change, and you need to have time with that. Also with time in your event, things take longer than you think, and it's better to have people standing around than it is to say, oh my God, we are not ready to go. Taking care of yourself. Lauren had some great tips about food, about clothes. I get busy, I get the event beard. Oh gosh, I have to go give an interview with CTV. Did I make sure to shave so I don't look like some creepy pedophile? Yes, take care of yourself. Plan food for the day, plan food after. Take care of your family. I've got 2 young kids. Am I getting childcare to help with my wife? So it's not just on her. Have I already bought groceries? Have I already made meals? Where's our food coming from that day? Getting help, because no person is an island. Get volunteers, hire staff, people that you can count on. That's one of my weaknesses, is that I forget about this. So you have people to help with your event, but you're taking care of them. Are they getting fed? Are they getting breaks? Especially if, you know, people are really into the concept of your event, they will just go, go, go. And you have to make sure and ask, be the person who says, did you have breakfast today? Have you gone to the bathroom? Because like, we're going to be doing this for the next hour and a half. Like, it seems a silly thing, but Laura and I from theater, like, we give a half-hour call, 15-5. And each time we're really saying, are you in costume and have you gone to the bathroom? Because we're starting this regardless. Sorry, that's it. And I don't want you peeing in a bush. So sometimes you have to ask that question. Looking beyond your event. A great example of this, the Terry Fox run. Yep, it's a run. We love runs. It's raising awareness and raising money for cancer. I'm doing a concert. What is the concert about? Is there a platform that I can push? Not push in a bad way, but is there something that we can talk about? Canada Day, we say, oh, look at the rocks and trees and water. Or can we talk about the inherent racism in some of our institutions and how that really detracts from our cultural vibrancy? And that has the same thread from the attacks on Muslim families, from residential schools, from denigration of people who are not middle-aged white honkies. Can it be both? And so we are furthering the event to both be a piece of entertainment, but also to make the world a better place. Where in your concept, can you go beyond that simple structure? It's always worth asking. Boom. Any questions? Ruth just had a comment saying that she's offered one tip to smaller event fundraisers: be detailed on your budget so you don't lose money. And that Ruth and her colleague Jill Harrison, who are both awesome, upstanding people, can help you with that. You can reach out, start small, build on success. Totally, in event applications, if you prove you can do one thing, then you can ask for more the next time. Get a buddy to help you, or someone with more experience. Great tips, Ruth. Thank you. Any questions from our 8 colleagues who are here about events? Great.
Thank you both so much for the presentation. That was really, really amazing. It was full of so much information, and I really, really enjoyed your presentation. Thank you both so much.
Not a problem. I've just put up our contact information, respectively, for Banff and Canmore. If anybody has any further questions that maybe didn't get addressed, or have any sort of things that you want to talk about that we didn't cover, by all means, feel free to shoot me an email or give me a call. I'm happy to discuss further. You can only talk about so much in 60 minutes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You packed a lot in as well. That was amazing. I think that was really comprehensive, and it gives people a real good starting point for what to start thinking about for future events. Yeah, and I've sent out the presentation slides. There's also a survey. If you're able to fill in the survey, that's really, really helpful. And save the date for our next speaker session. It's on Tuesday, November 23rd, and that's on endowment fund development. And thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. The recording will be available in a couple of hours, and I'll be posting that on the Facebook group as well. Thank you so much, Lauren and Eamonn. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.